We begin the new Masechta, Sukkah, Daf Beis. We begin the topics relating to the measurements and the halachas of Sukkah. Shiur's corresponds because of the joining us for today's Daf. Masechta Sukkah, the first two parakim of the Masechta deal with the Sukkah itself. The third and fourth parakim deal primarily with the Arba Minim, Esrog, Lulav, Hadasim, and Rabbas, and the fifth and last parak deals with the Simchas Beis HaShe'ebu. This parak opens up regarding the dimensions of the Sukkah, how tall a Sukkah may be, its maximum and minimum height, and how many walls must it have. Also, the ratio of sunlight to shade. Some of the key terms that we're discussing today's daf are tefach, regarding that of a handbreadth, an amma, which is around 5 or 6 tefachim. A mavai is that in Talmudic times they used to have an alleyway that all the courtyards opened up into the alleyways, and many homes opened up into that courtyard. Schach is the covering of the sukkah. Leishalta be'ein is the concept of that if you can't see the sukkah, you can't see the schach. Diras kava is the halacha if it's a permanent dira, and on sukkah you're supposed to have a diras arai, a temporary dwelling. Kedei Rosh Ruba Shulchana is the halacha that which is a measurement of 7 tefachim. The person has to have his head, the majority of his body, and his table in the sukkah, which in Talmudic times they used to lean back, so you have to make sure you had that to be in your home. So begin the current Daf Beis. Sukkah she gavoy l'mal mesim amma. If a sukkah is higher than 20 amas, psula, the Tanna Kama says it's too high, it's going to be possible. The Buddha machshir, the Buddha says no, that's kasha. I think we're going to explain their machlekes. When it's not 10 tefachim high, meaning it's very low, and the Gemara is going to explain the reason of this halacha. And or b'she'in lo shalish tvanis, if it doesn't have 3 walls, which Gemara is also going to explain the source for this halacha. And the third psul, if b'shechamasa meruba mitzilasa, if let's say there's too much sun, more than the shade, which is a well-known Rashi that everyone's busy with, the way the Ram explains it, that the miyut of the shade is batal b'roiv of the sun, and it's like as if you don't have any schach over here, and the whole name of sukkah, the object of sukkah is only because of the schach, and it's like you don't have schach here because it's batal in the roiv of the shade. You have more sun than shade, and therefore it's like as if you don't have any schach. So those are going to be 3 psulim of if it's less than 10 tefachim, doesn't have 3 walls, or you have more sun than shade. So the Gemara says we have a similar type of a wording as our Mishnah, but there's a difference, and the Gemara points that out. It's not possible. In the Mishnah, in the beginning of Masechtas Eruvin, says Mavoi, if you have an alleyway which is closed on 3 sides, and the opening was open to Rosh Hashanah, and you have the courtyards open to the Mavoi, and that's how they would get to Rosh Hashanah. Now, the truth is that the Mavoi is a Rosh Hashanah for the people that live in that courtyards, because it's not a Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is 16 Amos and there's 600,000 people. But the Chacham said it's forbidden to carry from your property to someone else's property, meaning even in the same Mavoi, without an Erev. The reason for that is because everyone's courtyard is considered a separate domain, meaning it looks like it at least. And the Mavoi is a property for everyone, so it looks like it, and you could confuse with a Rosh Hashanah. So Chachamim required rabbinically what's called a shituf of mavayis, which is like an Erev Chatzeris that we have that's in a bigger area, which all the courtyards join together with bread or wine, and they put that bread or wine in one of the Chatzeris. Now, additionally, besides, that's actually the main part of shituf of mavayis, that we're joined together, like we all live by his house because we have the bread or the wine over there. Then there's something else which most people actually today call the Erev, is that since it doesn't have a 4th wall, and it almost looks like a Rosh Hashanah, so they required what's called a heker, a sign, by the opening of Rosh Hashanah, either an upstanding lechi, which is a stick going up, or a kaira, which is a horizontal beam going from wall to wall. Now, that's what the Mishnah says. But if you have a mavoi that shohu, that the beam is gavoi mesamam, is higher than 20 amas, so then it's going to be yomai. What you should do is you should bring the beam lower down. Now, because it's too high. He says, no, you don't have to. The Gemara is going to explain over there. The Gemara explains over there exactly what their machlekes is. But the Gemara says, why Masukah do you say when you're talking about it's higher than 20 amas, you say it's puzzle? Why over there you didn't say puzzle? You said what you should do. You know, I always tell people when you communicate with people, don't just complain. Zug what's the vils? You know, say what you want, sir. You know, he just puzzle. There you say what you should. You say lower it. Why is the wording different in Eruvin than it is over here by Sukkah? Says the Gemara 2 answers. First of all, Sukkah is deraisa. The halacha of 20 amas, the Gemara is going to shortly explain to us, has a biblical source, and therefore even before the Mishnayos were taught, it was already a measurement of 20 amas from Har Sinai. So Tani Psula, it is applicable, it's appropriate, the way Rashi explains, to say terminology of puzzle. In other words, it wasn't done according to the Torah. Halacha, like everybody knows, already in the Torah it's written, this halacha. But Mavai, which the whole halacha is only D'Rabbanan, biblically, as long as there's 3 walls, you don't need to have this beam. It's only rabbinic law. So Tani Tekanta is therefore, you can't say a lashon of puzzle, because who invalidated before you, the rabbis, came along and taught the Mishnayos? This is where you're teaching the halacha. So you're coming and you're saying, Buz is the halacha, it's Yomai, because we have to tell you, can't say puzzle, what puzzle? We didn't know there was such a halacha. We're coming to tell you what the halacha is. Therefore we say Yomai, but there, by the law, you're going to say, this is not like the way it's supposed to be. Yeah, the halacha Mishpatim, we already know this halacha from biblical law. That's one pshat. Or if you want, you can say another pshat. But the truth is, even by biblical law, it is applicable to say takanta. To say that what you could fix, just like by rabbinic law. So why are we here? Yeah, maybe you could say psul, but why wouldn't you say you might? Why wouldn't you go ahead and say like be'ervin? I'll tell you why. Because miu sukkah, and the gear says in the fishin mile, by sukkah where you have many different halachas in our Mishnah, which each one cannot be fixed the same way as the other one. And you would have to say a specific terminology for every single one what you're supposed to fix it. Like for example, let's say the opening halacha of our Mishnah, regarding being too high, you would have to say you might lower it. Let's say the next halacha of the Mishnah when it was too low, so you would have to say yigbi, you have to lift it up. Let's say regarding the halacha that doesn't have 3 walls, you would have to say make the wall. And when you would say when there's too much sun then the shade, you would have to say add on schach. So therefore, pasuk b'tanim psula. So we just said a clear-cut terminology which we include everything inside of it by saying psula. Because as Rashi brings the Gemara Pesachim of Gimel Beis, it says a person should always teach in a very abridged version. We like when the shiur is very clear, concise, straight to the point, right? Tell me the thing. The shortest way possible. So therefore, we'll say psula. Now, regarding Mavai, which in that mission over there, when it talked about the first mission says it's Erevin, it only said 2 halachas. One about when it's too high, and one when it's too wide. So therefore, Tani Tekanta. So it said what you could do, which is you might. That one word you might includes both halachas too. So that's what we said. But to go through and say each one what we have to do to fix it, that we weren't going to do. So those are 2 answers why the wording here is psula, and over there it's yomai, either because here's the rice and there's the rabbanon, or because here it would take too long, and there it's the same one word that would tell you the halacha. Now the Gemara says, where do we know this halacha from, which we said that it's a biblical halacha that the sukkah, the skach cannot be higher than 20 amos? Where do we know this from? So Amar Rabba says answer number 1 is because Amar Kra. Pasuk says that you should make a sukkah where it's recognizable for you that you're sitting in the sukkah. How do you know this? Because the pasuk says in Yikra Laman Yedu Deresechem, so that your generations know. Ki b'sukkahs hishavti es b'nei Yisrael, that in the sukkahs I may have them sit the Jewish people. Which Rashi explains how rabbis understand in the pasuk that I commanded them to sit. They should know this, that I'm commanding them. So he's expounding the pasuk that you have to know that you're sitting in the sukkah. Because Rashi says, although really the pasuk really means to say that they should know that in the times of the Midbar when they came out of Mitzrayim, that Dananei Yaakov was surrounding them, but Lamaisa he's darshing the pasuk, Laman Yedu, that they should know that Hishavti, that I'm having them sit in the sukkah. So as the Gemara explained, Ad Esem Amma, until if a schach is up until 20 amas, let's say around 40 feet, a person knows that he's sitting in the sukkah. Lamal Esem Amma is hard 20 amas, he doesn't know that he's sitting in the sukkah. Why doesn't he know? Because his eyes can't see the schach. And what is the sukkah if not for the schach? That's the same words. If you don't know, if you see like some beautiful decorations on the wall, that doesn't tell you sitting in the sukkah. A sukkah is the schach. If it's too high up, you can't see it. And therefore, in other words, it's not like you can't see it, but it's like shalom and the person's eyes don't really see it in that distance. And therefore, that's reason number 1 why it's possible. He brings the second source of Pasuk in Yeshai. Pasuk says, that the sukkah is going to be for you a shade from the daytime, from the heat. So it sounds like a sukkah is only from schach that's made for itself, for shade. So ad esem amma until 20 amas on yeshiv tzil sukkah, a person sitting in the shade of the sukkah. But malam esem amma, meaning from the schach, higher than 20 amas, ain't on yeshiv tzil sukkah, a person not sitting in the shade of the sukkah, tzil tvanis. What happens is if you're sitting in a very tall sukkah like we have here in the picture, it's showing that what happens is that the shadow of the walls are, since they're very high, the shadows are overlapping. So you don't need schach because you're in the shade of the walls, which the Gemara later on is going to explain the machlekes of Rabbi and Rabbanan, which is a machlekes, if sukkah lamal machaf is kosher or not according to Zera, that is talking about that it's only 4 by 4 amas squared. So the Rabbanan knew that when the sukkah is only that exactly 4 amas squared, that you don't need the shade of the schach. You only, obviously, because if the sukkah was a mile long, obviously you would have the shade of the schach, not that of the walls. But Rashi is already giving us a sneak peek that the Gemara is going to explain that he's going like the opinion that holds that we're talking about a sukkah is 4 amas squared. 4 amas squared is not a big sukkah. And then the walls are 20 amas high. You can have the shade of the walls, not of the schach. But only Abai has a problem with Rabbi Zeir's interpretation. He says, wait a second. If that's the case, if someone makes his sukkah in Ashtar's Karnaim, which had 2 huge mountains, and there's a deep valley between them, and because of the height of the mountains, the sun never shines over there in the deep valley. Meaning, we had people who went where the sun never stopped shining, besides for a half hour during the nighttime. But then this place, the sun never shines. It's mamish, a deep valley, and the sun never gets to it. So people live over there, right? I mean, we know the shki was a difficulty, right? But I'm saying, you can't make a sukkah there? There's no Chabad house there in Ashtar's Kanayim, but you can't make a sukkah because the sun doesn't get to it. You has to get the shade of the schach. So Amalei, so Reb Zeir said to him, no, you got it wrong. Hasam over there, Dal Ashtar's Kanayim, if the mountains weren't there, it could sell sukkah, you would have the shade of the sukkah. So it's considered extrinsic, it's not a flaw in the sukkah itself. Hach over here, Dal Tfan is if you took away the problem here is the walls. The walls are giving you the shade and not the schach. If you took away the walls, like it sells sukkah, you actually would not have the shade of the sukkah, like Rashi explains, because the sun would come underneath it. Because again, the schach is so tall that you wouldn't be getting the shade from the schach. That's why, as you see, that the way the shadows are overlapping from the walls. If you took away the walls, you would have the sun come from underneath. So therefore, you don't have the shame sukkah be'etzim. It's intrinsic a problem in this sukkah, because not only are you technically not getting the shade of the schach because you're getting from the walls. If you took away the walls, then you also wouldn't get any shade. You would just be getting sun. So therefore, that's different than Asher's Kanayim, where the be'etzim, the sukkah is kosher. It's just in the environment that's problematic. Here, it's intrinsic flaw in the sukkah itself.
Even Asher's Kanayim at 12 o'clock noon, at Chatzos, the sun shines from the top.
Oh, at 12 o'clock. Well, it could be, depends where geographically, meaning how the, I don't know also if that would be kosher just to have a sukkah at 12 o'clock noon, like they say, if it's a dangerous area, if you can't sleep there, then it's not kosher for the eating and drinking. But I'm saying, I don't know if 12 o'clock noon would be enough. If let's say a sukkah is only kosher for a half hour a day, I don't know if that would make it kosher. But Rav Malchi says a third source, a pasuk in Vayikra, says that it says in the pasuk in Vayikra, "Sukkahs teacher Shabbos Yama." That in Sukkahs you're supposed to dwell for 7 days, which means a sukkah of 7 days and nothing more. Which that is temporary, and that would be sufficient with light walls, with inferior walls. So what's the Torah telling you? The Torah is telling you, Kol Shabbos Hayom, all 7 days. Same in Diras Kavah, you should leave a permanent structure out of your house. V'shev b'diras harai, you should dwell in a temporary dwelling. Now, so the Gemara explains. I mean, and where do you see that temporary? Because it's got to be just a 7 day dwelling. So ad esel amma until 20 amas ad ma'aseh diras harai. A person makes a dwelling a temporary. Lamal mes mama, if it's higher than 20 amas, ain't no ma'aseh diras harai. A person does not make his that dwelling temporary. Al diras kavah, he makes it permanent. Right? We know what happens when dwellings are not made in the appropriate structure. When you have high rises, right? You want to make sure that it has strong foundations and the walls are permanent. It's not going to fall down. So therefore, the Torah is telling you that it obviously cannot be higher than 20 amas because that would make a diras kavah, and we need to be diras harai because it's supposed to be only a 7 day structure, not a permanent structure. But Abai has a problem with Rav. He says, wait a second, if that's the case, then let's say someone makes walls out of iron. V'sichir al gabani puts that his bamboo sticks on top of that walls. It's not going to be a sukkah. It's diras kavah. It's a permanent structure. That structure could stay for the next 17 years. You told me it has to be diras harai. So on that, Amalei Rabbi says no. This is what I told you. Ad chaf amma until 20 amas. The adam diras harai. It's possible for a person, and that's the norm. A person up until 20 amas, a person would make a flimsy, impermanent structure. But the Amalei diras kavah, even if he's going to make it permanent, but nothing, he's also going to fulfill his obligation because in that category of kavah, there's osa arai, meaning because it's within the measurement of what the Torah is telling you of within 20 amas, because Rashi explains, there's a lot of lumdus over here, what's the svaras here, but al kapanim, the Torah wasn't particular regarding that it should be a temporary flimsy structure. It's giving you a shiur, a measurement, in its height. that it could stand through flimsy pegs and an impermanent type of a structure. So as long as it's within the 20 amas, which could be diras haroy, I don't care if you make a diras kavah. Whereas lamal b'chavama, but if it's higher than 20 amas, the other diras kavah, where a person usually only makes that's the only way the possible that it could stand really is a permanent structure. Even if you make it impermanent, you're also not going to fill the obligation, which again, there's many svaras, but basically that's the machlekes is regarding, well, he's saying, well, is it permanent or impermanent? And he's saying, nah, you're missing the boat. It's not about permanent, impermanent. It's regarding a shiur in permanence or impermanence. Generally, if the 20 amas, the person makes it aroy, that's what it has to be, even if you make cement walls. And whereas above 20 amas, so generally a person will make it kva, even if you make it aroy, it's not going to be good. So those are three different opinions.
Because it won't last.
What?
Because it won't last.
As I'm saying, it sounds like people don't. That's the shiur. If it won't last, could be it will last, right? We know that we higher than 20 amas.
Oh, yeah, higher.
Let's say it will last. That's what I'm saying. It's not. It's right. It's not. It doesn't say. It says ki obli diras haroy. Like so, when you made a diras haroy, so what? And it's not going to last. And let's say it does last, then it's going to be lemafrei kosher. And I'm saying.
Okay, so because it might not last.
Right. I don't know. These are they're busy with the svaras over here. Exactly what the svar. I mean, the Gemara is not gonna. We're gonna say the other Marim don't like this svar. As the Gemara continues on Amud Beis, the Gemara. Okay, these are the three interpretations we had. Says the Gemara, Kulu old Amaram. Why didn't they say like Rabbi, who learns that from Laman Yedu, that we said up until Chafam, the first shot. Rabbi was, he said up until 20 amas, that you realize, Laman Yedu, that you know you're sitting in the sukkah. Why didn't they say like Rabbi? Because Ahu, that is not talking about knowing that you're sitting in the sukkah. That's not taich in the pasuk. It's Yidila Dairasi. It's talking about that let the future generations know that Hashem surrounded the Jews with sukkahs, with Hatzav and Anania covered, that were made for their avos. So that's not, I mean, Laman Yedu doesn't mean that you should know that you're sitting in a sukkah. It's Laman Yedu that you should know that your avos sat, and so it doesn't mean you have to see and know that you're sitting in the sukkah, so that wouldn't be the source. Krebzera, not only, I mean, they also didn't say like Krebzera, that said it from the pasuk of Sukkah Letzel Yom, that you see Sukkah means that it has to be Letzel, and you have to get the shade from the schach, and you don't get it when it's 120 hours because you're getting the shade from the walls. Because that pasuk is talking about the days of the Messiah, of Mashiach. Those sukkahs will be for shade and for pleasure and for concealment. But the mitzvah sukkah has nothing to do with sell. But he would tell you it's not true. If that's the case, let the pasuk say b'chupat Letzel Yom. Why does it call it? It should say that there's going to be a canopy, and when Mashiach comes, that's going to shade you from the day. Why does it call it Sukkah? He says obviously it's stating there two halachas, that the name of Sukkah is only that which made for itself. So that of Yomei Mashiach, because it's made for shade, it's called the Sukkah. So therefore he does say that's a good source. So those are Yomei Mashiach, but it's still teaching us regarding our Sukkah, that the Sukkah has to be Letzel, and within 20 amas, you're not getting the shade from the schach, which is what the Sukkah is called, you're getting it from the walls. They also didn't say like the third opinion that of Rabba that said that you know from the fact that it says Basukah Teacher Shabbos Yom has to be for 7 days, which is Aroi. Therefore, that tells us only up until 20 amas. 120 amas is a permanent edifice. Is Mishum Kushid Abai, because they're bothered by his question. What do you mean? If you make a walls out of iron, that should be puzzle. And they don't like his answer that because, like Rashi explains, the pasuk is not precisely telling you Aroi. In other words, you don't learn that from it as shiur. So therefore, how would you know that it means a height? Yeah, maybe if the walls are made out of iron, there should be puzzle because it's not a 7-day structure; it's a 7-year structure. So therefore, they don't like Rabba's answer, his source, because they like Abayi's question, and therefore that's why each one of them didn't say like the other one of them are wrong. And now the Gemara brings 3 different Amiram in the name of Rav, and the Gemara is going to ask like which one of the interpretations we brought up until now is this halacha of Rav like. Says the Gemara, Kaman. According to which one of the Maram that we mentioned, Asla Hadam Yeshua Amarav. Rav said, according to Yeshua, the following qualification of machlekes. This machlekes between Rabbi and Ran in our Mishnah, if a sukkah is the schach is higher than 20 amas kosher or not, is only the machlekes b'she'im tefans magis l'schach. Only if the walls don't make it up to the schach, like this picture shows, that you have the beams keeping the schach higher, but the walls don't make it all the way up to the schach. That's where that machlekes if it's going to be kosher l'mal mechaf or not. But if the walls make it all the way up to the top to the schach, for l'mal nasam kshera, the Rabbi Yishua said in the name of Rab that everyone would agree over the even Rabbanan that above 20 amas is going to be kosher. Says the Gemara, Kaman, who according to which one of the 3 interpretations is this going like? That's going Kirabba. Because the Amma, he said, what's the reason why it's possible mal according to Rabbanan? Because your eyes don't see it, and therefore not from man yedu. but since the walls go all the way up to the ceiling, to the schach, your eyes will see because your eyes will follow up the walls. You see people that are looking up the walls, and you see where it goes to. Because Rashi explains, if the reason is because of aroi, because it has to be an impermanent structure, or because of, let's say, you have to have the shade of the schach, like the other two interpretations. So the fact that the walls go up to the schach, why would Rabban agree? You're still not getting the schach. He's not getting the shade of the schach, even if the walls go all the way up. To the contrary, you're probably getting more from the walls than the schach in that case. And also, that wouldn't make it any more impermanent. So therefore, it must be going like that of Rav. Now says the Gemara, another teaching of Rav. A different Amar in the name of Rav. He says, Machlekes, all Machlekes doing the reading of if it's kasha up until 20 amas or not, is b'she'im ba'el arba amas l'arba amas. We're talking about where the sukkah was only a 4 amma squared sukkah. But let's say it's bigger than arba amas squared. Oh, then nothing then even if it's above 20 amas, it's going to be kasha according to Rabban. Says the Gemara, command according to which interpretation is that going like? It's going to Kirib Zera. The Amar that he says, Mishum Tzelu, he says, what's the reason why it's puzzle when it's above 20 amas? Because you're not getting the shades in the schach, you're getting the shades of the walls because the walls are so big that they're overlapping each other. That's where you're getting the shade from. Because Rashi explains, if the reason would be because your eyes don't see, so then if it's a little bit bigger than Dalet Amas, your eyes still don't see. Why would that be a reason to be kosher? But since it's because of the svara of shade, so Bekivan de Revicha, so since it's wide, it could tell sukkah. So then you can have the shade of the sukkah and not of that of the walls, which Tais explains that it would also be proportionately how big it is, how tall it is. That then you might be getting the shade of the sukkah. So that halacha that we're talking about specifically down on the squid is going like Rabbi Zera. Then we bring one more halacha. And they're all in the name of Rabbah. They're all saying different qualifications in this machlekes in our Mishnah. The machlekes only b'she'ein machzekes el k'dei reisha ruba b'shalchana. Machlekes in the size of the sukkah was not like the previous interpretation, which Rashi points out. It seems to be a contradiction of Rav. And he says no, machlekes in what Rav actually said, because the previous interpretation said what's the case of the Mishnah is when it's 4 amas squared. Here we're saying it's actually zayin tefachim squared. It has to be the amount of your head, the majority of your body, and your table, which is just 7 handbreadth, which is obviously much smaller than Dalet Amas squared. So that's where the machlekes was. If it's the size of that type of sukkah, then is it kasher l'mal machaf or not? A machzek is yismech the reish ruba b'shulchan, but let's say it contains more than your head and the majority of your body and your table. Then even if it's above 20 amas, is going to be kasher. Says the Gemara, command, which like one of the maram is alike? Says the Gemara, like echad. It's not like any one of the 3 maram we mentioned before that they said what's the reason why it's possible malam, like Rashi explains. Because if it's like the svara that says because your eyes don't see above 20 amas, so when it's a little bit bigger than Rish Ruba Shulchanai, you're still not going to see above 20 amas for the schach. And also, if it's a little bigger than than 7 tvachim, you're also not going to get the shade of the schach. And also, the walls are still going to have to be keva, permanent, if it's above 20 amas. So this interpretation of qualifying the machlekes only if it's Rish Ruba Shulchanai, but it's a little bit bigger than that, would be kosher according to everything. The Lamal Machav is not like any one of the 3 Amaram that we mentioned up until now, which we don't know what his svara is, but it's definitely not one of the 3 that we said up until now. But now the Gemara says a little bit of a cheshbon. The Gemara goes through. We had 3 different Amarim in the name of Rav to qualify the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabban in the Mishnah. What was the case that they were disagreeing about? That it's possible Malachav. And now the Gemara explains each one of those 3. Bishlam the Beishia, we understand Beishia who he qualified in the name of Rab that the machlekes was only if the walls don't reach the schach. But he said if the walls reach the schach, then everyone agreed that it's going to be kasher. So we understand that Pliga the Rav Huna and Rav Chana bar Abba, the reason why he has a different interpretation than that of what they're saying in the name of Rav is because the Inu Koyoy V'Shur B'Mashcha, they were giving a measurement in the length of the sukkah. They were disagreeing. What did Rav say was the case of machlekes? Was it Rish Ruba Shulchanai, which is 7 tvachim squared, or was it Dalet Amas squared? But he didn't have a Messiah that you're giving a measurement in the length of the sukkah, because he said I don't care how big or small it is. The machlekes was only how high it is, if the walls reach the schach or not, because that we said was regarding Shalta Be'en or not. So we know why he didn't say like that. But Rav Huna, Rav Chana bar Abba, that they said the reason of the Rabbanan. The reason why it's possible Lamal Machav is because it depends on the length of the sukkah. And one opinion says because to Masukah Dalet Amas, other one says because to Masukah Rish Ruba Shulchanai. So what's their machlekes regarding if it's a little bit bigger than Rish Rabbi Shulchan or Dalet Amos, but then suddenly the Rabbanan agree that's Kashal Mal L'Chav, and they're both talking about in regarding the length, the area of the sukkah. Says the Gemara, name of the Hechsher Sukkah. Let's say regarding the validity of the to kasher sukkah in its length and its width, that's what kamiflagi. That's what they're disagreeing about. In other words, they both agree that when the Rabbanan disagree in the Mishnah, they're talking about the smallest possible sukkah to be kosher in its length. Now, when it's a little bit more, then it can be kosher even if it's higher. Because since there's more space, like Rashi says, Samari says, either then you'll get the shade of the schach, or some other reason. We don't know what the reason is that it's going to be kosher. But seemingly, that's what they're disagreeing about. It's only when the minimum size of what a sukkah is. Because as we'll see later on in the Masechta, there are some opinions that say a sukkah is kosher with dalet amos squared, or that a Rish Rabbi Shulchan. And that's what they're disagreeing about. The Mar Saba, the Rav Huna held Hechsher Sukkah Barba Amos. That Rav Huna held that you can't say the machlik is less than dalet amos, because if that would be the case, even without being 20 amos, that would be possible. Because to validate a sukkah has to be, like the way Rebbe says later on the next daf, that has to be dalet amos squared. So that was the case that they were disagreeing about. Umar Sava, whereas Rav Chanan bar Abba held, no, Hechsher Sukkah b'machzek is Rish Rabbi Shulchan. The minimum size that a sukkah could be is to fit a person's head, majority of his body, and his table, which is how they used to eat. We were reclining on their couches, and they would lean on their left side, and they wouldn't eat sitting up like we do. Therefore, you have to have Reish Rubai to exclude a small sukkah where his head could fit in, but his table wouldn't, or his majority of his body wouldn't. But seemingly that's what they're disagreeing about regarding the minimum size of a sukkah, and then when it's any bigger than that, then it's going to be kosher again for whatever the reason is. Says Gemara, no, not necessarily. The kulam, you could say according to everyone, the Hechsher Sukkah, the minimum size of a kosher sukkah is Rish Rabbi Shulchan, which is the smallest, which is like 7 tvachim, which is like a little bit more than the Amma, which he could fit his head, majority of his body, and his table. So then, so what are they disagreeing about in regards to if the machlik is regarding dalet amos or Rish Rabbi Shulchan? Is the Marsa Rabbi Chanan Rabbi held the Matzek is Rish Rabbi Shulchan Pligi the Machlekes is only in this small size of fitting his head, the majority of his body on the table. Of a Yosim Rish Rabbi Shulchan the Bakol Ksher. Everyone holds it's going to be kosher. And the reason why it's possible Lamal Mesem Amma, says Rashi, we don't know the reason as we said before, because it's not like anyone of Amiram, but ultimately it's only Rish Rabbi Shulchan. But more than that, it's Mikosher Mal Machav. But Marsa Rabbi Huna held that no Rish Rabbi Shulchan. From that Zayin Tvachim Adalet Amos until 4 Amos. Pligi, that's included in their machlekes regarding the height of 20 amos, and the reason why is because they hold the reason is because of the shade of the schach. Because Al Yosef Dalet Amos with 1 Dalet Amos, Tida Kol Ksher only is going to agree it's going to be kosher because since it's very wide, so then you're going to have the shade of the schach. So again, the Gemara says not necessarily that they're disagreeing regarding the minimum size of the sukkah. Could be everyone agrees it's the smallest of Rish Rabbi Shulchan and Zayin Tvachim. So why is it putting the hold that it has to be Dalet Amos? That's the machlekes, and only more than that did they hold that it's going to be kosher l'mal machav. Is because it has to tzel. And tzel, you're not going to have, like we quoted from Rashi Aman Aleph, in a sukkah that's less than dalet amos squared, you're not going to have the shade of the schach you can have in other walls. But now the Gemara says Mesir. The Gemara now asks, an old Amiram who had explained the machlekes of the Mishnah of Yehuda and the Chachanim, which specifically it's really under Yehuda and Chachanim Barabba, from the following brisa. The brisa says, Sukkah shigivay l'mal mesem amma, as we said in the Mishnah, sukkah that's higher than 20 amos. It's psula, according to the comments, the Rabban is possible. Rabbi Yehuda Machshir says, no, kashim l'mal machaf amma. Ad abam chamishim amma, up until 40 or 50 amos, which goes to a whole discussion why sometimes it doesn't ask the question, what do you mean 50, 40, of course including 50. But it's kashim even more than 20 amos. Rabbi Yehuda says, I'll bring you a raya. Ma'aseh b'Hilni HaMalka. There was a story with Queen Hilni, in Lud. She used to sukkah gavay mesem amma. A sukkah, she was sitting and was higher than 20 amos. Always it came to and the elders were coming and going out of that sukkah. But didn't say her anything. Obviously, it's kosher. So Amalei, they said to him, to Rabbi Yehuda, B'Sham Raya, from that story is a proof. Isha, he said, she was a woman. A woman's exempt from a sukkah. So of course they're not going to say anything to her. Amalei, they said to them, no, she had 7 sons. And they had to sit in the kosher sukkah. Everything she did was only based on the validation and the verification of the sages. Which Gemara says, wait a second, why do they have to say that everything she did was only based on the sages? Why do you need to add that on? Says Gemara, this is what he was talking about. If you're going to say what's the proof from the sons, they were little children, and children are also exempt from a sukkah, just like a woman. Says no, keeping the shiva, since there were 7 sons, it's not possible that there weren't at least one of them that didn't need his mother anymore, which Gemara tells later on the Chachas and Aleph, that a child who doesn't scream mommy, mommy when he wakes up in the morning, you have an obligation of chinuch of the mitzvah of sukkah. So at least one of them was 8 or 7 or whatever it was old enough to need a sukkah. Now, the Chidim are beginning to say, wait a second. The whole halacha of a child who doesn't need his mother anymore, midrabanan is only rabbinically obligated, that we have to accustom the child to mitzvahs that he should be fit for, so that he should mechunech and get used to mitzvahs. You're right, she wasn't so particular about rabbinic law. That's what Tashma, that's why I had to tell you that no, everything she did was based on the sages. And obviously she kept rabbinic law, and obviously that she had a child that needed to do the mitzvah of sitting in a sukkah. Obviously a sukkah, is kosher, because none of the rabbis said anything to her, and she kept rabbinic law, and she had at least one son that was already the age of chinuch. That's the brisa. But one thing the Gemara concludes like this. You understand the contribution that he said that in the name of Rab that the whole machlekes in the Mishnah was only if you say that the walls did not reach to the schach. But if the walls reach to schach, then maybe Rabban would agree it's kosher al machaf, because we said like he holds like Rabba that it's the leishol to be'ena, that your eyes would see it even though it's lamal machaf. Darka shel malka leisha b'sukkah shein defanis megis l'schach. The way of the queen is she would sit in a sukkah that the walls don't reach to schach. You know why? Is there about Gimel and Alf? Shemavira. Because you need some air, you need some exhaust, you need it's too hot. So therefore, the walls didn't reach to the schach, and that is why Rabbi Yehuda and the Chacham were disagreeing in that case of Hilmei Malka, because the walls didn't make it to the top. And therefore it makes sense that they're disagreeing in that case. But Elam, Laman da Amar, according to Rav Huna, and according to Rav Chan Bar Rabba, the Amar that they say, B'sukkah Kitana Machlekes, the Machlekes was regarding a small sukkah, but if it's a big sukkah, the Rabban would agree that's going to be kosher, whether it's bigger than Rabbi Shloimy, whether it's bigger than Dalar HaMasquir, but be that as an aid, they both held that if it's a big sukkah, then it's going to be kosher even Lamal Mechaf. But you think a queen sits in a small little hut? No, of course she's having a huge Rebbe Sukkah. So what do you mean? So everyone would agree it's kosher Lamal Mechaf. Why is there machlekes Rabban and Rabbi we quote in the Brisa that they're disagreeing if the sukkah of Hilmei Malka is kosher or not? What do you mean? According to you two and Merom, of course it should be kosher. It's a sukkah Gedaylo. So Amar Rabbi ben Rabbi, he says no. What happened was that sukkah were small little booths. Of course, a queen's not going to sit in the cramped quarters, but each one was sitting in their own booth, in their own sukkah, and therefore it was a sukkah gitana, and that's why they're machlekes. But you're right, if it was a huge sukkah, like the way they were explaining, it would be kosher. I said, well, come on. You think the queen's going to sit in like small little booths? But as Rashi explains, what do you mean? She has all her maidens and all her servants that are sitting around her. She can't sit in a small little booth. That telephone booth, is she sitting in that small area? No, it's a huge, huge place. So again, it's difficult in those opinions. So Mamash says, no, like this picture illustrates, that you're right, it was a huge sukkah for all the entourage that were there. But inside the big sukkah, there's the VIP booth there in the back, where you pay a few little, where you don't want the paparazzi to bother you. So it's a little bit discreet over there. So there's a little booth over there. That's where she was sitting. That's the sukkah of Hilmei Malka that they were machlekes regarding if that's kosher or not. Because it was either Rosh Hashanah or it was Dalar HaMasquir. So that's the interpretation. Rabban held, but now b'sukkah ma'al yahav yasvi. You're right. They weren't bothered by Yehuda's question regarding the children, the sons that have the chiv of chinuch, because the sons were sitting in the large sukkah. The large sukkah l'malachaf is kosher. But she was sitting in this small little booth because of modesty as being discreet. Therefore, they didn't tell her anything because although it was possible, hard little booth, but they weren't bothered because a woman is exempt from sukkah. Whereas Yehuda saw he held no, but now her sons were sitting by her in the small booth. And still they didn't tell her anything, and therefore, obviously, that we see that a sukkah l'mal l'chav, even what's Reish Shulchan or Dalar HaMasquir, is going to be kosher, which Rashi says that most definitely, according to Rav Chanan, it is difficult. And this teretz must be only according to Rav Huna, that's Dalar HaMasquir, because the shiur of Reish Shulchan, the Gemara tells us later on, is only Zayin Tzvachim. So it's not possible that Hilmei Hamalka with her 7 sons were sitting in 7 Tzvachim. Tyson disagrees. Tyson says actually it could be 7 Tzvachim in one area, but then it could be huge the other way. It could be very long and narrow. So it could have been that they were there. But be that as an A, at least for Rav Huna, who said it's Dalar HaMasquir, it's not sure. The machlekes was where the sons were sitting. But yes, she was sitting within Dalar HaMasquir, in the large sukkah. She had her small little hut inside of it. I think it's any time for us.